Okay, good morning. Time now a minute past 8 a.m. On the Friday, May 10th, 2024 in Japan Standard Time. Welcome to another edition of the World Bank Tokyo Online Morning Seminar. We organize these online morning seminars to introduce the very latest report put together by the World Bank, presented by the authors of the report. This morning, we are going to feature the latest edition of Women, Business and the Law 2024. This was released on the March 4th this year. We have two colleagues from the team working on this report. We have Victoria Kaitena and also we have Lian Shen. Both of them are the analysts from the Women, Business and the Law project of the World Bank. For the next 35, 40, maybe 45 minutes, we are going to listen to both of them summarizing the main findings of the report. After their presentations, as usual, I'll read the question that we received from you. And also, if you did not have opportunities to send your questions in advance, please send your question on using the online form posted on the announcement page of the seminar, or you can simply post your question on the chat section of the YouTube screen. I will read your question on your behalf, asking both of them to make a comment and responses. With that, I would like to formally invite Victoria and Lian to come in to kick off your presentation. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and greetings from Washington, D.C. I would like to start by extending our gratitude to the External Relations team for organizing this event and for this kind invitation. Thank you so much for having us today. And my name is Victoria Haitina. I am an analyst and I work on the Women Business and the Law team. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Liang Shen. It's truly an honor for us to be here to discuss the work we're doing at the World Bank's Women, Business and the Law project and present to you the latest findings of the Women, Business and the Law 2024. I would like to invite Liang to introduce her and we can start our presentation.
Thank you, Victoria. And hi, good morning, everyone. So my name is Liang Shen, also an analyst at the Women Business and Law team. So with further ado, let me just share my screen so that we can start.
Thank you. And we very much look forward to an engaging discussion. Thank you. During the presentation today, we will provide a brief overview of our project, present the new Women, Business and the Law 2.0 three-tier approach, and discuss the report findings relevant to the OECD high-income region, followed by a deep dive into Japan's performance across all Women, Business and Law 2.0 indicators. And we would be happy to answer any questions you may have. But before we do that, let me briefly put our discussion in context and remind everyone about the importance of gender equality. Women around the world still face challenges that impact their daily lives. For instance, in the ability to freely and safely choose where to go and where to work, to access equal opportunities to enter and remain in the labor market, to manage their time, their careers, and care for their children and families. The data speaks for itself. Globally, 1 in 2 women work compared to 80% of men. And when women do work, they're more likely to be in informal, vulnerable, lower paying jobs. So, all in all, gender equality is not just a moral imperative, it makes economic sense. Our research finds that equal treatment of women under the law is associated with larger numbers of women entering and remaining in the labor force and rising to managerial positions. It generates higher wages for women and facilitates more women owning a business. And this is why making laws that are equal can serve the dual purpose of promoting gender equality and strengthening the economy. When all citizens, regardless of gender, have an equal opportunity to contribute to the economy is more dynamic, resilient, and strong. So let's start with an overview of the Women, Business and the Law project. The first Women, Business and the Law report was published in 2010. Since then, we have been dedicated to improving our product and delivering publications that are evidence-based, data-driven, and that can also be useful to World Bank operational teams and external organizations working towards advancing gender equality. Over the past 15 years, Women, Business and the Law has analyzed laws affecting women's lives around the world with one goal: to measure the impact of laws, or lack thereof, on women's economic opportunities. The Women, Business and the Law 2024 report is the 11th in a series and offers a comprehensive picture of the obstacles that women face in entering the global workforce and contributing to greater prosperity for themselves, their families, and their communities. Since 2020, we have presented an index covering 190 economies. And up until last year, 2023, the report measured countries' progress towards gender equality in the law through 8 indicators built around a woman's key interactions with the law through her life cycle. These indicators are mobility, workplace, pay, marriage, parenthood, entrepreneurship, assets, and pension. This year, Women, Business and the Law 2024 expanded its measures to include 2 new indicators, one on safety, which is violence against women, and another one on child care. Both areas critically impact women's livelihoods and economic opportunities at different points of their lives. This new framework paints a more accurate picture of the challenges and opportunities experienced by women as they go through their lives. But we cannot change what we don't know. And this is the reason why this year, on top of adding 2 new topic areas and revising existing indicators and questions in our legal frameworks index, we have also expanded beyond the legal index to assess critical areas where change is needed the most and to understand what prevents laws from being fully implemented in practice. Because let's face it, passing a law without implementing it, it's like writing a letter but never sending it. We knew that there was a critical piece of the puzzle missing. So in addition to measuring legal frameworks, our team started measuring supportive frameworks, meaning the extent to which countries are putting their laws into practice through mechanisms designed to support their proper implementation, such as public policy instruments and access to justice. To get a fuller picture of women's rights in real life, we have asked experts in a subset of countries to measure their perception of the implementation and effectiveness of laws in practice. So to summarize, we have a brand new Women, Business and the Law 2.0, which analyzes laws, policies, and expert opinions across the 10 areas measured. When we have expanded the indicators to childcare and safety, we find that the legal gender gap is, in fact, much wider than we previously thought. While our last report finds that women enjoy only 3/4 of the legal rights afforded to men, measured by 8 indicators, we now find that in reality, women have only 2/3 of the legal rights of men, measured by 10 indicators. This means that the 3.9 billion women in the world still face legal barriers affecting their economic participation. Another interesting finding is that last year, in the old measure with 8 indicators, 14 OECD high-income economies scored 100. However, with the introduction of the new measure containing 10 indicators, none of the 190 economies has achieved a full score of 100. This indicates that no economies have achieved legal gender parity in the areas measured. While change is never easy, one thing we know, that change is possible. 18 countries in all regions but South Asia made progress toward legal gender equality by enacting reforms captured by Women, Business and the Law. They enacted 47 reforms to increase gender equality under the law. The Slovak Republic is the only OECD high-income economy that reformed last year. The Slovak Republic reformed in the parenthood indicator by introducing 28 weeks of paid paternity leave. And I will now summarize our Women, Business and the Law 2.0 main findings, starting with legal frameworks. The Women, Business and the Law 2.0 Legal Frameworks Index reports a global average score of 64.2 of 100, indicating a significant gap in legal gender equality. None of the 34 OECD high-income economies received a score of 100 in the 2.0 Legal Frameworks Index. Among the OECD high-income economies, 11 score 90 or above, with Italy leading at 95 points. 2 economies, New Zealand and Portugal, score 92.5 out of 100. And Japan receives the lowest score in the region in the 2.0 Legal Frameworks Index. So let's now take a closer look at the indicator-specific findings for the OECD high-income region and where Japan stands. The mobility, pay, marriage, parenthood, and assets indicators have an average score above 90 in the 2.0 Legal Index, meaning that most economies have removed restrictions or introduced legislation to grant the rights, benefits, and protections measured by these indicators. Challenges remain specifically in the area of safety. No economy in the region scores 100 in this indicator, with a regional score of only with a regional average of only 41.2. Japan performs above the regional average in parenthood, childcare, assets, and pension indicators in the 2.0 Legal Frameworks Index, and the lowest scoring indicators in the Legal Frameworks Index are safety and pay. Enacting gender equal laws is merely the first step towards securing women's rights. Equally essential are supportive frameworks to ensure that these laws uphold the rights they aim to protect. The Women Business in the Law 2.0 Supportive Frameworks Index encompasses a variety of measures under each of the 10 indicators, including programs for women's economic empowerment, disaggregated data to assess women's needs and progress, gender-sensitive budgeting, and others. What we discovered is that almost all economies around the world, even those with the most gender equal laws, face a substantive implementation gap. The global score of 39.5 indicates that globally only 40% of all frameworks, as measured by Women Business in the Law, have been put in place to support the implementation and enforcement of laws to advance gender equality. The OECD high income region has the highest average score of 68.1 amongst all regions in the Supportive Frameworks Index. 8 of the OECD high income economies score 80 or above, with Canada leading, followed by the United Kingdom and France. Japan receives a score of 67.5 in the Supporting Frameworks Index, which is below the regional average. So let's take a closer look at the indicator-specific findings. Supportive frameworks for most indicators are lagging. When it comes to the implementation of the law, OECD high-income economies perform relatively well in the marriage and childcare indicators. On marriage, for example, 23 economies in the region score 100. In contrast, large implementation gaps are observed in entrepreneurship and assets indicators. Japan performs in the Supportive Frameworks Index is better than the regional average in the safety, marriage, childcare, and entrepreneurship indicators. So let's move on to our third index of pillar, expert opinions. Here at Women Business in the Law, we're curious by nature, so we wanted to know more. We decided to survey experts on their perception of how the laws measured by women business and the law, or their absence, function in practice. And this perception-based assessment sheds light on the areas in which women's rights are most lacking in practice and where women's access to economic opportunities is still limited. Women Business and the Law 2.0 expert opinions include 30 OECD high-income economies. Expert opinions scores are not available for all economies due to an insufficient number of responses received. Across the sample of 164 economies, the expert opinions score is, on average, 65.7 out of 100. The average expert opinion score for the OECD high-income region is 82.9 out of 100, suggesting that experts perceive that women experience greater rights in practice. 11 economies score 90 or above in the expert opinions index, with Norway leading, followed by Finland, Iceland, Hungary, Estonia, Lithuania. In Japan, according to expert perception, slightly more than 60% of women have equal rights with men in practice, and this is above the global average, yet below the regional average. So, to give you the big picture of where Japan stands within the Women, Business and the Law 2.0 index. The Women, Business and the Law 2.0 legal framework score for Japan is 72.5. The supportive framework score for Japan is 67.5 out of 100, and the expert opinions score for Japan is 67.5 out of 100. So let's dive into legal and supportive frameworks for each of the indicators to understand what is measured and which gaps persist. Because protecting women from violence is a fundamental first step toward female empowerment, safety is the first indicator in the new index. This indicator analyzes 4 forms of gender-based violence against women that have significant impacts on women's economic empowerment: child marriage, sexual harassment, domestic violence, and femicide. Across all data points measured in the Safety Legal Frameworks indicator, Japan receives no answer. When it comes to the supportive frameworks, no sufficient evidence was located that there are special procedures in place for cases of sexual harassment. So let's dive into each component of the Safety Legal Frameworks indicator. One of the components of the safety indicator is child marriage. Child marriage is a marriage between a child that is under age of 18 and an adult or another child. A country is assigned a positive score if all of the following elements are present. The legal age of marriage is at least 18 for both girls and boys. The law does not provide for exceptions to legal age of marriage based on parental consent. Marriage in violation of the age requirements is void or voidable, or the law establishes penalties for anyone who allows, registers, or celebrates marriages in violation of the age requirements. The next component in the safety indicator is legislation on sexual harassment. Legislation on sexual harassment in employment is already assessed by Women, Business and the Law, but the new safety indicator expands the measurement to education, public spaces, and online. 92 economies globally address at least 2 forms of sexual harassment, including by establishing criminal penalties or civil remedies, and meet the methodology threshold for a positive answer. Japan still does not have a definition of sexual harassment in employment and does not establish criminal penalties or civil remedies for sexual harassment. Further, the law does not cover sexual harassment in education, public places, or transportation. The next component of the Safety Legal Frameworks indicator is legislation on domestic violence. Domestic violence is a gender-specific violence commonly directed against women and occurring in the family and interpersonal relationships. Globally, 104 economies have comprehensive laws addressing domestic violence. For the country to get a positive score, a country must address not only 4 types of domestic violence: physical, psychological, sexual, or economic, but it should also legislate specific criminal penalties or protection orders in addition to criminalization of marital rape. In Japan, there are no provisions for sexual and economic violence, and the law does not provide for criminal sanctions. The Women, Business and the Law 2.0 Index, for the first time, provides a global measure of laws criminalizing femicide. Femicide is an intentional killing of a woman with a gender-related motivation. Only 29 out of 190 economies measured explicitly criminalize femicide. Japan is yet to introduce legislation to criminalize femicide. On the Safety Supportive Frameworks Index, Japan receives no answer on the question of procedures for cases of sexual harassment. Specialized courts or procedures can provide a more efficient handling of cases because regular court staff may lack the gender sensitivity or specific competencies required to address cases of violence against women and may be subject to a case backlog, thereby leading to delays and higher costs. And according to Women, Business and the Law 2.0, only 29 economies have specialized procedures for cases of sexual harassment. One of the good practice examples from the region is Anti-Discrimination Act of Australia, which sets out a procedure for making and hearing complaints of sexual harassment. And our next indicator is mobility. The mobility indicator evaluates legal constraints to a woman's agency and freedom of movement, both of which are likely to influence her decisions to enter the labor force and engage in entrepreneurial activity. Japan receives a positive score across all data points in the Mobility Legal Frameworks Index. The Mobility Supportive Frameworks Indicator measures barriers that constrain a woman's agency and freedom of movement in practice, as well as consideration of women's specific mobility needs in public transportation policies and plans. Globally, only 27 economies explicitly recognize such needs. Japan is yet to introduce a policy that explicitly considers the mobility needs of women in public transportation. Our next indicator is the workplace indicator. The workplace indicator analyzes laws affecting a woman's decision to enter and remain in the labor force and protections against discrimination. Women, Business and the Law 2.0 introduces 2 new components: discrimination in recruitment and the right to request flexible work. No provisions enabling workers to request flexible work arrangements could be located in Japan. The Workplace Supportive Frameworks Indicator measures the existence or absence of key policy instruments and practices that support the implementation of laws affecting a woman's decision to enter and stay in the labor force. Japan has received no answer for the data point on whether a specialized body receives complaints about gender discrimination in employment. So let's deep dive into the workplace legal frameworks and specifically the flexible work question. Evidence shows that flexible work arrangements facilitate greater female participation and retention in the labor force, contributing to a more equitable distribution of unpaid work between women and men. According to the methodology, a positive score is assigned if the law grants employees the option of requesting flexible work arrangements either through flexible time or through remote work. Women Business and the Law finds that in 68 economies, workers have the option of requesting flexible work arrangements through either flexible hours or remote work. No applicable provisions could be located for Japan that provide employees an option to request flexible work by changing their hours or allow an individual to request remote work. In the Workplace Supportive Frameworks indicator, Japan receives no answer for the question on whether there is a specialized body that receives complaints about gender discrimination in employment. According to the methodology, a positive score is assigned if a specialized independent body has a mandate to receive complaints related to discrimination in employment by public and private actors based on gender. And a good practice example from the region is the Workplace Relations Commission of Ireland. The Commission is an independent body, and core services of the Commission include the inspection of employment rights compliance, the provision of information, and the provision of mediation, conciliation, facilitation, and advisory services. Thank you for your attention, and let me stop here and hand it over to my colleague Liang to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Victoria. So the next is the pay indicator, which analyzes laws, policies, and perceptions related to women's occupational segregation and the gender wage gap. The legal frameworks measures mandates of equal remuneration for work of equal value and women's work at night in industrial job and in the jobs deemed dangerous. And Japan receives a no for 3 questions and scores 25 out of 100 in this indicator. So which means in Japan, employers are still not legally obliged to pay equal remuneration to male and female employees who perform work of the equal value. Japan's Labor Standards Act bans employers from hiring women 18 years or older for underground labor. And this makes Japan one of the 59 economies where women are prohibited from performing certain tasks in industrial jobs. And the Pay Supportive Framework indicator measures the existence of certain practices, guidelines, and other policy instruments that affect a woman's pay, such as pay transparency measures and enforcement mechanisms, and the availability of statistical data on women's employment in certain industries. Japan receives no for the pay transparency question, meaning that pay transparency measures or enforcement mechanisms have not been introduced to address the gender pay gap. And among the 34 OECD high-income economies, 22 has scored yes for this question. Give you some example here. In Spain, companies are required to create and maintain a pay transparency registry, and companies that fail to comply with this requirement may face sanctions, including inspections and auditing by the Labor Inspectorate. And in Peru, the National Superintendence of Labor Inspection has issued a directive to enforce pay transparency measures, including a schedule for equal pay inspections. And then let's move on to the marriage indicator, which analyzes laws, policies, and perceptions related to women's marriage and divorce. The legal indicator here measures constraints related to marriage and divorce because equal rights in marriage and divorce are critical to a woman's agency, financial security, and health. And specifically, we look at whether women can be head of household in the same way as men, and whether women can obtain a divorce and remarry in the same way as men. And Japan scores 75 here, and it receives a no for the whether women have the same rights to remarry as a man. For this question, a score of 0 is assigned if the law limits a woman's right to remarry, such as requiring a waiting period before remarriage or divorce is not legally allowed. And according to the Civil Code, a Japanese woman has to wait 6 months to remarry if she is pregnant at the time of divorce. So this makes Japan one of the 67 economies globally where a woman still does not have the same right to remarry as a man. And let's move on to the supportive framework of marriage, which measures the availability of fast-track processes in family disputes, specialized family courts, and legal aid in family law disputes. And Japan scores 100 in this indicator. The 6th indicator, parenthood, which analyzes laws, policies, and perceptions related to women's work during and after pregnancy. The legal indicator here measures the availability of paid maternity and paternity leave, whether the cost is covered by the government, and whether dismissal of pregnant women workers is prohibited. And Japan receives a full score here. And the supportive framework indicator measures the ease of application and incentive tool for fathers' leave and availability of data on women's unpaid care work. And Japan receives 66.7 out of 100 here. Japan receives a no for the question on whether there are incentives in place to encourage fathers to take paternity leave on the birth of a child. In order to receive yes answer, Japan could consider including incentives in laws or policies, including having tax breaks for voluntary savings, contributions that can be carried forward, etc. And 21 out of the 34 OECD high-income economies have scored yes for this question. And for example, in Sweden, parents receive a cash bonus when parental leave is divided equally between caretakers. And in Belgium, fathers are protected from unlawful dismissal while taking leave to care for their children. Next one is our second new indicator, childcare, which analyzes laws, policies, and perceptions related to the availability, affordability, and quality of childcare services. Research shows that access to childcare is an important tool for increasing women's labor force participation, especially in low and middle income countries. And in addition to combating restrictive gender norms and providing employment opportunities, WBL started collecting data on childcare since 2021. But this year is the first time we expand the scope to 190 economies and presented this standalone indicator. Under this indicator, we assess the legal frameworks governing childcare provisions for children from birth to 2 years and 11 months. The legal indicator measures here whether the law establishes the provisions of childcare services in center-based settings by the government, private providers, or employers, and whether the law provides for some form of support, financial or tax, for families or childcare providers, and whether the law establishes quality standards for the provision of childcare services in center-based settings. And the supportive frameworks examine the presence of mechanisms that support parents in making informed decisions about childcare and promote the overall well-being and development of young children and ensure access to quality childcare services. And you can see that Japan receives 100 in both legal and supportive frameworks indicators. It is actually one of the 9 economies in OECD that have these good scores. The next indicator is the entrepreneurship, which measures laws, policies, and perceptions related to the ability of women to establish and run a business. This legal indicator measures constraints to a woman's ability to start and run a business, gender-sensitive criteria in public procurement and quotas for women on public corporate boards. And let's look at one of the questions, whether the law prohibits discrimination in access to credit based on gender. And for a country to receive a yes to this question, the law shall prohibit discrimination by creditors based on gender or prescribe equal access for both women and men when doing business, or prohibit gender discrimination when accessing goods and services. And Japan did not receive a yes for this question, which means the law does not prohibit such discrimination. And in OECD, 3 other economies also do not prohibit discrimination in access to credit based on gender. They are Chile, Norway, and Switzerland. Move on to the supportive frameworks, which measures the availability of statistical data on women's business activities, government-led strategies, and programs on women's entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurs' access to financial services. And Japan received 66.7 out of 100 in this indicator, and there isn't any current national government plan or strategy with a focus on women's access to financial services. And again, there are 2 good examples here. In Canada, the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy launched in 2019 aims to help women grow their businesses through access to financing, talent networks, and expertise. And it seeks to double the number of women-owned businesses by 2025. All right, that second to last indicator, assets indicator, it examines laws, policies, and perceptions related to the gender differences in property and inheritance law. The legal indicator measures women's rights to immovable assets through property rights and inheritance, including land rights. And Japan is among the 33 OECD high-income economies that receive a full score here. And on the supportive framework indicator, it assesses government efforts to uphold women's rights to owning and inheriting immovable property, and policies that actively promote and support women in registering land, together with awareness campaigns and the collection of sex disaggregated data, play a pivotal role in ensuring gender equality in property ownership. And Japan, you can see here, Japan receives a no for the second and the last question. Here again, some good examples in the OECD. In Iceland, the Statistics Agency has published sex disaggregated data on first property ownership, and the data is available from 2017 to 2019. On the other hand, in Germany, the Federal Ministry of Justice publishes comprehensive information regarding marital and inheritance rights. Our last indicator here is pension, analyzes laws, policies, and perceptions related to women's ability to save for old age. And the legal indicator here, there's no change from the old legal indicator. So I'll move on to the supportive framework indicator, which measures the incentives to increase women's retirement benefits and dedicated procedures to challenge benefit decisions. And Japan receives a no for this question. Are there incentives in place to increase women's retirement benefits? In order to receive a yes, Japan may consider including tax breaks for voluntary savings contributions that can be carried forward, and etc. And again, there are some examples here in OECD high-income region. The United Kingdom offers a tax breaks for the voluntary savings with automatic enrollment to increase women's retirement saving rates. And in Chile, it provides child bonuses and contributory pension supplements to reduce the pension gender gap. And after the detailed overview of the legal and supportive frameworks finding by indicator for Japan, here is 2 graphs of all 3 pillars together using the subsample of 164 economies. And globally, women have about 2/3 of the legal rights to men, as Victoria mentioned earlier. And the data shows a significant lag in the processes needed to implement those legal rights effectively. And by contrast, the expert opinion score, averaging 65.7, is actually closer to the legal framework's score. And this suggests that expert perceptions of women's rights are more aligned with the legal situation than with the supportive frameworks in place. And this pattern persists by region and income group. You can see it on the screen. On the one hand, supportive frameworks generally align with legal frameworks, but often lag. On the other hand, the results are mixed when it comes to the relationship between legal frameworks and expert opinions. And in summary, using a three-tiered approach, measuring legal structures, implementation processes, and expert perceptions of women's rights in place provides valuable insights for policymakers and activists. Although progress has been made in women's rights, significant challenges still persist, as we've shown in today's presentation, and women are far from enjoying the same rights as men. And to conclude, I would like to encourage you to read our report, use the data and evidence in your own work, and to act together to empower women. And thank you so much. Victoria and I will be happy to answer your questions now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Victoria and Lian, for your presentation summarizing the main findings of the latest edition of Women, Business and the Law 2024 edition. We received some questions from the audience in advance, and also we received 2 questions during your presentation related to Japan. So let me read the 3 questions first, asking you to respond comprehensively, and then we come back to the second round on Japan. First question. How does these finding of the report, particularly women enjoy the just 2/3 of the legal rights that men enjoy, will impact and if necessary change the lending operations and the other support the World Bank currently offers to the government of the developing countries? For example, in case of climate change, the bank is trying to increase and target the 45% of its lending to be linked and shifted for the climate change related areas. So that's one. A second question, how do you measure the indicators for respective countries? Do you conduct interviews or listen to opinions of the relevant expert from the respective countries, for example? Did you conduct such surveys for Japan? So that's the second question. Third one, would you comment on how the report's findings look like for the Africa as well as South Asia regions? It may be possible that 2 regions where the poverty has been accumulated heavily compared to the other regions marked the challenging scores. So those are the 3 questions that we received in advance, and then I would like to invite both of you to come in to make the brief comment on those points. Thank you.
Len, do you want to start? Or I may start with the first question. And so thank you. So we are a research wing of the bank, and we are not directly involved in lending operations, and we provide evidence-based analysis that can be useful for the operational teams. But as far as we know that recently there has been a significant increase in the share of projects directly linked to addressing gender inequality and gender gaps. So yes, so every year we publish our reports to inform our client countries and also to inform our colleagues and operations what can be done and what can be changed. And countries can also look at each other to track their progress. But Lian, please feel free to come to add.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. I don't have much to add, as you explained that our what our project is, but I can get to the question on Sub-Saharan Africa. I think that's an interesting question because we do have a few workshops with the Sub-Saharan Africa region. in the past. And so the question is, so because of the Sub-Saharan African region has a different development compared with other regions, so how we differentiate from in our methodology. Actually, we don't differentiate any region or country in our methodology, and this is how it makes our WBL index comparable across these 190 economies and in all regions. And I also wanted to add one more thing. It's WBL top reformers are usually in Sub-Saharan Africa region, and especially regarding to WBL 1.0 last year, Sub-Saharan Africa region actually led the reform efforts. 6 economies enacting 20 legal changes and affecting all the areas indicator, the old past 8 indicators we measured apart from the mobility indicator. And also we also had the seminar, I think last year, I'm talking about one of the examples is Togo is the top reformer in the past 53 years when we did the research last year. And especially, and this is just examples of showing how we measure. But as I think, Victoria, you mentioned, we do have some caveats in using a standard method to measure all the countries. For example, we measure the women in the main business city. That's the one that we got commented a lot in the past as well. But we do need to get back in order to have our data comparable.
Thank you, Liang. And I can take the second question on our data collection cycle. I think it's very relevant. So how we do our data collection, the Women Business and the Law team designs a survey that applies assumptions Liang was talking about and basic case study. Then the Women Business and the Law team administers our surveys to lawyers, judges, civil society representatives in 190 economies. These local experts who complete our surveys on a pro bono basis are identified by their expertise in the various areas of law covered by the report. And I'm proud to share that over 2,400 respondents with expertise in family law, labor law, and criminal law contributed to the Women, Business and the Law 2024 report. Then the Women, Business and the Law team engages with local experts through conference calls, written correspondence, and in-person meetings. And all responses are then analyzed and each answer verified against the corresponding primary legal source. And lastly, the data undergoes a thorough internal review in which comments on the data are received from across the World Bank Group. And to the question where we also distributed our surveys to our contributors in Japan, yes, we did. We also collected responses from our contributors based in Japan who kindly provided responses to our questionnaires, and these responses were used to analyze data and produce findings.
Thank you very much for your responses. We received questions from Professor Naoki Yoshino. Thank you very much, Yoshino-sensei, for sending the questions. 2 questions. Excellent presentation. First question, each indicator is shown as a level. Will you have changes in each indicator of Japan and whether Japan is improving in each indicator? So this is the first question. Second question, as is pointed out, Japan's legal law has to be changed to improve Japan's situation. what would be your recommendation to push the politicians to improve the current situation? So those are the 2 points raised by Professor Yoshino. Any comment from both of you? Thank you.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question. I'm actually I wanted to share my screen for by indicator changes. I remember we presented last year for the overall changes. Maybe Victoria, you have a better say on that actually. All right, let me briefly share my screen. All right. So this is what we presented last year for the women's rights in Japan. The development from the WBL index changes from 62.5 to 78.8. This is under the WBL 1.0, and it's slightly. You notice that there's slightly different score compared with this year, the score we presented today. So you can see each of these little changes are the reform. I don't have this by indicator. I don't know if Victoria can share that later, and we can also share this information with you after this meeting as well. I just wanted to highlight the changes over the years.
Thank you, Liang. And yes, I'm glad to take the second question. So the second question, like what policymakers can do and what we can do to inform reforms and support policy makers. So to begin with, I would like to mention that women business and the law scores depend on the quality of legal reforms, not quantity. The indicators provided by the Women Business and the Law report can serve as a roadmap for countries, highlighting the areas that require attention and improvement. And for example, by focusing on the quality of legislation and its implementation, countries can make meaningful progress in advancing gender equality. And of course, it will be reflected in the Women Business and the Law scores. And the Women Business and the Law report can be very useful for policymakers because the report allows to identify the implementation gap also, not only the legal gap. So for example, by examining the supporting frameworks index, countries may pinpoint areas where their policies fall short. Most importantly, in our latest edition of the report, we've mentioned that what gets measured can be managed. And the latest edition of Women Business and the Law highlights what governments can do to accelerate progress toward gender equality in business and the law. And in what areas it's most needed to accelerate efforts to reform laws and enact policies that empower women to work and start a business. And everyone can be a voice of change. Please advocate for legal and gender reforms. Please review our website. We have the snapshots available for 190 economies. Please disseminate our data, disseminate our findings, and we hope it will be useful for policymakers to make informed decisions and take actions. Thank you.
I just add one more thing since we mentioned website. All the data that we have are published on our website as well. There's a little tab on top, you can say data, and underneath they have this economy snapshots for both 1.0 and 2.0 for Japan specifically, and you can check it out if you're curious about what laws we're referring to.
Great, thank you very much. With us this morning, connecting from Washington, we had Victoria Kaitena and Liang Shen. Both of them are the analysts from the Women, Business and the Law project of the World Bank. Thank you very much for both of you summarizing the latest edition of the Women, Business and the Law. And we are certainly looking forward to listening to the next edition next year from the team about the progress of not only Japan, but also the other countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us today. Thank you. Have a good day.
Great, thank you very much. So we continue organizing these morning seminars. For the latest information, please check the World Bank Tokyo office website. So thank you very much once again. Have a nice weekend and see you next time. Thank you.